This episode is brought to you by Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. It gives you everything you need in one place for free. Yes, free, which you can do right from your phone or your computer. It gives you creation tools so you can record and edit your podcast so it sounds great. They'll even distribute your podcast. You can hear it from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many other places. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Now, download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Now, enjoy the next episode from Coach Cameron. Here's something to think about. I am fascinated by the athletes that were always not the best one on the team, but they were always striving to be the best player on the team. I'm curious about that. And then the ones that are the best ones on their team early in life, if they're the best athlete in middle school and maybe ninth grade, and then they kind of plateau and they disappear, and they get burnt out or don't play or just don't go to the level that you thought they were. You kind of wonder about their development and what happened. So there's many factors to be played here. But I'm just going to explain one factor that I think is going on is when you have athletes, soccer players that are number one, and they've been number one their whole life, early on from elementary school to middle school, and then everything kind of evens out in high school and college. And they just kind of plateau out, and they're like, okay, this is just not what they want, and they don't keep developing. They just stay the same, and people pass them by. Then you have the athletes that are always kind of number two because of growth, development, or whatever it might be. But they're number two, maybe number three, best player on their team, but they're always striving to be number one. And because they have to strive to be number one for so many years, especially in the early years, the elementary, middle school, and they try to battle for 8-9 years of trying to be number one, and then finally they obtain being number one, and then they maintain that kind of effort, that was developed trying to catch number one to be the number one, propels them so high that they have a more successful career than the ones that started out too early of being number one. Does that make sense? So if I had an athlete, if I had one of my children that was by far number one, like scoring machine, just number one, and I haven't had that. Jack's always been really good, very technical, very tactical minded. He understands the game, and he plays really well, but he's never been like the number one top player, overwhelming kind of thing. He's always been striving for that, and I've always put him in a situation where he's playing against olders where he's always not going to be number one. But I'm just doing that to test him. It wasn't by design, but it's interesting to think about that. If you have a child that's number one, I would find a way to move them up a couple years in age where they're not number one anymore. They're number two. I would not want my child to be number one on the team, like overwhelming, too easy. They're the whole team. I would want them to be where they're number two, number three on the team. That's what I would want in that situation. So if you have a gifted athlete that's number one and scoring 1 million goals, which is nice, guest play, enjoy that moment. If you have to enjoy that, do that, but get that athlete to guest play with older teams, different teams that they're number two, number three, assuming the coaching staff doesn't screw it up. But there's just so many factors that screw everything up. But I think there's something to be said with someone that's trying to strive to be number one in an environment where they're number two. You have to have them constantly reaching to be number one. That's my thoughts on it. I don't know if that makes sense, but you see a lot of athletes that just, when they're not number one anymore, after being number one for 10 to 15 years of just being the top athlete, they just fizzle out. I see it all the time at Phoenix College. I get all the number ones from their high school. They're number one, they're the captain, they're the best, and they come and then they're number two, number three, and they don't know how to handle it. They don't do well. So put your child in an environment that they are always striving to be number one, always finding ways to put in the effort. And those are my thoughts today. Goodbye.